Hello, I'm Dr. Carl. It's been a little while since I've made a video, and today I wanted to discuss democracy versus republic. A lot of people, when someone says, like Elon Musk, for example, that lack of free speech is a threat to democracy, inevitably someone jumps in and says, the United States is not a democracy, it's a constitutional republic. And I see the distinction that's being made, but want to make it clear that you're wrong with your terms. And as a political science professor myself, I'll explain this to you. So, what exactly is the difference between a democracy and a republic? First of all, let's begin by discussing the etymology of the two words. And the etymology for the two words is actually identical. They both mean rule by the people. What's the difference? The difference is they come from two different languages. As we all know, the classical world had two really important languages, Greek and Latin. Democracy is Greek, republic is Latin. So in terms of the etymology, that's the only difference. They're otherwise synonyms. And I thought I would give you another example of this phenomenon. What's the difference between freedom and liberty? I never really thought much about it, but living here in Tbilisi, the main square at the end of Rustaveli Avenue is Tavis Upalis Moadani, which usually is translated into English as Freedom Square, but I've also seen it translated as Liberty Square. And then the thought occurred to me, what's the difference between freedom and liberty? There's a bit of a slight connotation difference. I mean, generally speaking, we would think of liberty as being a component of freedom, but at the end of the day, aren't they basically synonyms? The reason we have two words, as is often the case with English, a Germanic language heavily influenced by the Romance languages through the Norman French conquest, they are of different national origins. Liberty is of a Romance background. Note the French liberté, the Italian libertà, the Spanish liberdad, the Portuguese liberdade. Freedom, by contrast, is Germanic. Note the German Freiheit, the Dutch Vrijheid, and the Swedish Frihet. If you were to translate liberté from French into German, you would get Freiheit, or vice versa. And if you were to translate either word, liberty or freedom, into German, you would get Freiheit. Likewise, if you translate freedom or liberty into French, you get liberté. So they're basically synonyms from two different languages, that's all. So what exactly is the difference in the here and now? Well, basically a republic has come to mean any country that doesn't have a king. But that doesn't necessarily mean a free country. For example, China doesn't have a king, but it's still, so therefore it's a republic, but it's not a democracy. They don't have regular elections. Vietnam, same thing. Cuba, likewise. So basically, a democracy is a country that has free and fair elections, and a republic is a country that doesn't have a king. And all four possible combinations exist in the world today. There are countries that are democracies and republics, democracies but not republics, republics but not democracies, and countries that are neither. I'll give an example of countries that are democracies but not republics. Britain, Sweden, Netherlands. These countries are democracies, but they have kings or a queen. Countries that are republics but not democracies, I already mentioned some, like China, Cuba, for example. Countries that are neither republics nor democracies, Saudi Arabia. They have a king and they're not a democracy. And many countries are both. Countries like France or Switzerland or Italy or Germany, and yes, the United States. So the United States is both a democracy and a republic. It has free elections and does not have a king. The distinction those of you who are saying that the United States is a constitutional republic, not a democracy, are making is not between republic and democracy. Instead, you're making a distinction between various forms of democracy. There are a number of different ways in which democracies can be arranged. For example, take parliaments, or in the case of the US Congress, you can have a single member district first past the post system. This is the British system which the United States inherited, where you have single member districts across the country represented by one individual, and whoever gets the most votes in an election, even if it's not the majority, it could be a plurality, is elected to represent that district. You also have a first past the post system where it has to be a majority. This is what we find in France, for example, where if nobody gets a majority in a certain district in the first round, there's a second round between the top two. Many of the other countries in Western civilization have a proportional representation system, where if one party gets 15% of the vote, they get 15% of the seats in parliament. These are all different forms of democracy. Likewise, sometimes a democracy has a strong president, like the United States, France. Other times the president is more of a symbolic figurehead, like in, say, Germany or Italy. And likewise, there are different ways to elect the president. France elects the president, theoretically could be one round, but it's always two. If nobody gets a majority of the vote in the first round, and that never happens, then the top two go on for a second round. The United States has a structured electoral college system. But these are both democracies. And since it's a president, not a king, they're both republics. Basically, what you are making a distinction here is between direct democracy versus sort of a structured system like the electoral college is. For example, if the president won by a pure popular vote, that would be a direct democracy. But to make sure that the views of people in different states and different parts of the country and urban versus rural is respected, the United States has the electoral college systems. It's kind of more of a structured form of democracy. But again, it's a form of democracy. It's not a republic versus a democracy. I mean, for example, one of the most famous republics in the world is Switzerland, where it's a tradition to put many issues to a national referendum 4 times a year. I know I had the pleasure of living in Switzerland once. So, I mean, Switzerland is both a democracy and a republic. And just one more quick question I would want to ask many of you who insist that the U.S. is a republic and not a democracy. If the U.S. were to somehow get a king, and we all agree that will never happen, few of us would want that, be it a native-born American king, or if the U.S. would somehow re-recognize the British monarch as Canada and Australia still do, the U.S. would cease to be a republic. And those of you who don't think that the U.S. is a democracy, in your minds, would the U.S. be neither at this point? Because those of you who say republic, not democracy, one of the main reasons you mentioned, I know, is the electoral college system for the president, but surely you're also referring to the way Congress is elected, where every state gets the same number of senators, single-member districts in the House, also the system of federalism between the federal, state, and local governments, also division of power between the 3 branches of the government at each level. Well, of course, the U.S. would not become neither democracy nor republic, so that means it's a democracy as of now. In short, those of you who say that the United States is a republic, not a democracy, I see what you're getting at, and you're making a great point, but you're using the wrong words. It's not democracy versus republic. It's direct democracy versus more of a structured, more of an indirect democracy. I'm Dr. Carl. Enjoy.